Hey everybody, and welcome to this deep dive. Today we're going to be looking at Ryan Holiday's Ego is the Enemy.
Okay.
We're going to be cracking it open and looking at just a small excerpt that I think is super fascinating.
Right.
And it uses the stories of Ulysses S. Grant and William Tecumseh Sherman
Interesting.
to kind of illustrate how ego can really trip you up, even when you're at the top of your game.
Right.
You would think that once you've achieved successing, you've made it. You're at the top.
Yeah,
But there's still this it can still really mess you up.
for sure.
And that's what we're going to be kind of exploring today.
I'm excited.
Yeah, through the lens of these two really interesting historical figures.
Absolutely. So what's so fascinating about this particular excerpt is that it highlights this really stark contrast
Mm.
between Grant and Sherman after the Civil War.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So, both of them obviously instrumental in leading the Union to victory.
Right.
And they were basically offered anything they wanted,
Wow.
name your price kind of situation.
Yeah.
And Sherman, he kind of surprised everyone. He chose to just retire peacefully. Yeah, he seemed content with what he had achieved. He didn't need more.
Right.
Grant, on the other hand, he had his sights set on something else,
What was that?
the presidency.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So you would think that would be like the natural next step.
You'd think so, right?
Yeah.
A war hero, the presidency, it seems like a fitting capstone to this incredible career.
Yeah.
But Grant's presidency, it wasn't exactly smooth sailing.
Really? What happened?
Well, his time in office, it was really kind of marred by scandals and this general sense of ineffectiveness.
Hmm.
And it almost seemed like the world of politics with all its, maneuvering and compromise.
Yeah.
It just wasn't really his forte.
Interesting.
And it really makes you wonder, was this pursuit of the presidency, was it driven by genuine ambition? Or was it something else?
Yeah.
Maybe a need for validation,
Right.
a fear of fading into obscurity.
That's a really good question.
Yeah, and things didn't exactly improve for Grant after his presidency either.
No, I mean, his life took things went downhill pretty fast, right?
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
He ended up investing almost all of his wealth in a venture with this guy named Ferdinand Ward.
Okay.
And you can kind of think of it as like a 19th century Bernie Madoff situation.
Oh, wow.
It turned out to be this massive Ponzi scheme
Oh, no.
that completely wiped him out financially.
Oh, man.
And it's interesting because Sherman actually mentions in his letters that Grant had this desire to rival the millionaires.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Almost like even after achieving so much,
Mm,
leading the Union to victory, becoming president,
right.
it still wasn't enough for him.
Yeah.
His ego was driving him more towards chasing wealth and status.
It's so interesting how Sherman was content with just retiring. And, Grant needed more. It's almost like he needed that validation.
Yeah, and that's where this concept of euthymia comes in.
Euthymia.
Yeah, it's a Greek word that means tranquility or contentment. And Holiday argues that Sherman seemed to embody this idea. He recognized the value of inner peace over external validation.
Hmm.
He wasn't driven by this constant need to prove himself or amass wealth and power.
Okay.
It wasn't about outdoing others for him. It was about finding satisfaction in his own achievements and contributions.
Yeah, it makes you wonder, did Grant ever really achieve that sense of inner peace?
Right. Did he ever truly feel content? Or was he always striving for something more?
Always chasing something else.
That's the question that Holiday really wants us to think about.
Yeah.
It seems like Grant, despite his undeniable military genius, he might have fallen into this trap of believing that external achievements would bring him lasting happiness.
Yeah,
And that's something that I think we can all relate to in some way.
for sure. Yeah, it's like we're almost taught that happiness is something that we achieve. Like it's this external thing that we have to earn.
Right. It's not something that's within us.
Yeah, and that's where ego can really mess us up.
Exactly. Because it tells us that we need more.
More of everything.
Yeah. More money, more recognition, more power, and then we'll finally be happy.
And then we just end up on this hamster wheel, right?
Yeah.
Constantly chasing the next thing, never really satisfied.
That's exactly it.
Mhm.
And Holiday really argues that we need to define success for ourselves,
Okay.
not let it be dictated by what society tells us or, what other people are doing.
For sure. It's so easy to compare ourselves to others and
Yeah.
think, oh, if only I had that, then I'd be happy.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's what we have to be careful of.
It's so tough, though. Thinking about Grant and how his ego kind of led him down this path,
Yeah.
it makes me think about all the times that I've said yes to things that I didn't really want to do. Maybe out of obligation, or maybe because I thought it would make me look good to someone,
Yeah.
even though deep down I knew it wasn't really what I wanted.
It's funny how we do that, right?
Yeah.
We prioritize external validation over our own happiness.
Yeah. And that's what Holiday's warning against in the book.
Yeah, he even uses the example of money specifically.
Eh.
He says, if we haven't defined what enough looks like for us, we'll always be chasing more.
It's so true.
It never really ends.
It's like that saying, the more you have, the more you want.
Yeah, that's the nature of ego.
Yeah, it's insatiable.
Right. It thrives on this idea of scarcity. He keeps
Mm.
telling us that we need more to be complete, to be
Okay.
happy.
So it's not just about saying yes to the wrong things,
Right.
right? It's also about having the courage to say no to things that don't really serve us.
Right. Even if they seem tempting in the moment.
Even if they sound really good.
Yeah. Every choice we make, it comes with trade-offs.
Right.
And that's something that ego really struggles with.
Okay.
Because it wants to have it all.
It wants everything.
Right. But we have to recognize that trade-offs are just part of life.
Yeah, you can't have it all.
And once we understand that, we can start to focus on what truly matters.
It's like trying to fit everything you own into a suitcase that's already overflowing.
Yeah.
At some point, you got to make some tough choices about what you're going to leave behind.
Exactly. And that's where self-awareness comes in.
Okay.
Holiday talks about asking ourselves,
Right.
why do I do what I do?
It seems like such a simple question,
Right.
but it can be really hard to answer, honestly.
It can.
Ugh.
And once we do, we can figure out what our motivations are, what our priorities are,
Okay.
and then we can make choices about where we're going to put our energy.
Yeah, it helps us to say no to the things that are just distractions
Well,
to
yeah.
all the noise.
Exactly. And it brings us back to that idea of euthymia that we were talking about earlier.
Right. Sherman being content with retirement.
Yeah. He's a great example of someone who knew what his values were,
Mm-hmm.
and he wasn't swayed by what other people thought.
Yeah, he had that inner peace.
Right. He understood that true contentment comes from aligning your actions with your values,
Okay.
not from chasing after external markers of success.
So how do we actually do that?
That's the million-dollar question.
Yeah, how do we escape the grip of ego and start living more authentically?
Well, Holiday doesn't really give us a step-by-step guide, but he stresses the importance of self-awareness. Choosing our own path and understanding that success comes from living in line with our values.
So it's almost like we have to unlearn some of the things that society has taught us.
Yeah, like the idea that happiness is something that we earn, when it's actually something that we cultivate within ourselves.
It's a process.
It is,
Yeah.
and it starts with questioning our assumptions,
Okay.
shedding those layers of ego,
Right.
and figuring out what truly brings us joy.
It's about realizing that true success isn't about what you have or what you've accomplished. It's about who you are and how you live your life,
Exactly. It's about defining success on your own terms.
not by someone else's standards.
And that's where the real challenge and the real reward lies.
Because it's so easy to get caught up in the comparison game,
Oh, yeah.
constantly trying to keep up with the Joneses.
That's where ego really thrives.
Yeah.
But if we can recognize those tendencies in ourselves, we can break free from that cycle and start to create a more fulfilling life. It's about choosing to run our own race at our own pace
Okay.
and towards a destination that we define for ourselves.
It's amazing when you think about it. Like, grant this war hero a president, you'd think he had it all.
You really would.
But then you hear about these struggles he was going through,
Yeah.
his need for more.
Yeah, and that's the thing about ego, right? It can be so sneaky.
Fully.
It tells us we need more, that we're not enough as we are.
Yeah, like happiness is always just out of reach.
Exactly. Like if we could just get that next thing, then we'll finally be happy.
But Grant's story really shows us that's not true.
No, it doesn't.
Yeah.
It really doesn't. And that's such a powerful lesson.
It is, like true happiness. It comes from within.
Exactly.
From aligning our actions with our values, from finding peace in the moment.
Not from constantly chasing after something more.
So looking back at Grant's story, what can we learn from it?
That's the big question, right?
Yeah, how can we avoid falling into the same traps?
Well, Holiday emphasizes the importance of self-awareness. It's about asking ourselves, why am I doing this?
Right.
Is this really what I want?
Is it aligned with my values?
Exactly.
Huh.
Are we chasing external validation? Or are we looking for inner fulfillment?
And sometimes those are really tough questions to ask ourselves.
They are. But we have to be honest with ourselves.
Yeah, even if the answers aren't what we want to hear.
And we have to have the courage to say no,
To things that don't serve us.
even when they seem really tempting.
Even when they look good on the surface.
Exactly. Every choice we make comes with a trade-off.
Right.
Saying yes to one thing means saying no to something else.
And we have to be aware of the stories we're telling ourselves.
About success about happiness.
about what it means to have it all,
Yeah, we need to take control of those stories.
and define success on our own terms.
Exactly. It's about embracing the journey, finding joy in the present moment,
And realizing that we are enough.
just as we are.
Wow. This has been a really thought-provoking deep dive.
It has.
It's a good reminder that ego is a powerful force.
That really is.
And we all need to be aware of its influence in our lives.
But we can break free from
By cultivating self-awareness,
Yeah.
defining our values, and making choices that are aligned with those values.
It's about creating a more fulfilling life.
And to bring it all back to Holliday's book, I want to leave you with this question.
Okay.
If you could sit down with Ulysses S. Grant, knowing everything that we know now about his struggles, what advice would you give him?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
And I would even add to that, what advice would you give your younger self?
Ooh, that's even better.
Knowing what you know now,
Yeah.
think about the choices you're making, the things you're chasing, the values that are guiding you.
Yeah.
Are you running your own race, or are you letting your ego dictate your course?
I hope this deep dive has given you all some food for thought
Me too.
and encouraged you to reflect on your own journey. Until next time, keep questioning, keep learning.
And keep diving deep.
We'll see you then.